political economist and co-chair of the National Consultative Front, Professor Pat Utomi, joins us now. Professor, thank you so much for joining us this Tuesday morning.
It's a pleasure.
Professor, always a pleasure to have you join us. Good to know that you're still here. Let's begin by asking you again to take a look at the state of the nation. Always a place to start. So many issues: the Twitter ban, the security issues, the secessionist threat. You know, there's so many. So just let's start with an overview of your thoughts on these critical national issues.
I think the perplexing thing about the list of challenges we have as a nation that you have just listed is that most of these take away from progress. Most of these do not add to a higher quality of life for citizens. You know, the Twitter ban that you mentioned, I wanted to just ignore it because I didn't think it was worth dignifying with comments. Every day we make ourselves more ridiculous in the eyes of the world by not showing maturity in the way that we make choices. And this is making our country really a place that serious-minded people around the world want to ignore. And let's face it, the evidence is all over us. I mean, look at how many African presidents the President of the United States has spoken to on the phone. But we can't even get the Vice President of the United States, in spite of very strong relationships, to even talk to our President. At best, we are managing to get a Secretary of State do a virtual tour of Africa and travel through here. I think that tells us something about our standing in the world today. Many years ago, you know, I was privileged to participate in a program in Sweden, essentially looking at the state of the world as part of a process every 5 years of looking at our world. And some very senior person, a very globally regarded person in those days during the Balkan crisis, we saw him on television almost every day, said that the sad story of Nigeria is that it has become strategically irrelevant in the world. He said that 30 years before, if anybody wanted to do anything in Africa, no matter how powerful, United States, Soviet Union, whoever it was, even if they ignored, certain things, they would first, at the very least, ask themselves, how would Nigeria react to this move we're about to make somewhere in North Africa or South Africa? It says, but today, those same people can walk into Nigeria's backyard and completely ignore Nigeria. I think that people who are privileged to be in leadership position must have a way of doing an examination of conscience every day and ask themselves before they go to sleep or as they wake up in the morning, what direction have I taken my country? Is it further forward or is it backward? Sadly, very, very sadly, our country has been taken very, very far back. I mean, look at all the indicators. The youth of this country would take any risk to just get out of Nigeria. I mean, some of them are dying in the Mediterranean just to get out of Nigeria. And those who are qualified and can get on a plane, the one we ticket to Canada, are heading there. If I were a leader in a country that is experiencing that, I would not be able to sleep. I would be obsessed with what can be done to stem this kind of hemorrhage. Instead, glibly, people in positions of power and authority just create more crisis every day. Now, let's even assume that Twitter offended against any sensibility, whatever it is, even though I consider the subject on which this has been raised rather pedestrian to do the kinds of things that we're doing. The statesmanly thing to do is perhaps to recognize that some things are best ignored, or some diplomatic initiative is used to engage those matters, and perhaps they could create solutions, outcomes that are preferable, that leaves the country with some dignity. It just seems that we have no sense for the dignity of Nigeria. We don't feel a sense of shame when everybody makes a choice in favor of Ghana over Nigeria. I mean, I've been talking oil and gas last couple of weeks on a series on Nigerian history that I run. And the point we were making just 2 days ago in that series that looked at the PIB is that all the smaller countries around us have managed policy choices that have made them more attractive than Nigeria, which used to be the lone star on this continent, literally speaking, at least south of Libya, in the oil and gas sector. And what, 78 or so billion dollars in investments came into the continent, mainly in that sector, much of it to LNG initiatives in Angola or thereabouts, Mozambique. And, you know, only 5% of all the investments that came traveling these parts reached Nigeria. In fact, as we know, most oil and gas companies in Nigeria are considering disengagement.
Yeah.
Why don't we think and say to ourselves, our country is bleeding. I owe more to my children than the shenanigans of this moment, than the hustlings of political power. You know, these medieval ways of looking at things, and think modern, and think the common good, and think making progress. Now we go to the subject of security, which obviously has dominated the way that we look at these things.
All right,
but we do know.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, Professor, good point, opening point you've made, but you've highlighted the challenges which are, you know, quite far and wide within the Nigerian space. Where do you think the starting point should be in addressing these crises? For the past 2 weeks, the talk has been constitution amendment, the Senate and the House of Reps holding zonal public hearings in different parts of the country. For many, that's a way to go. For others, it's just a waste of time. What are your thoughts?
Professor Utomi, can you hear us?
Well,
that exists between the low and yeah, I can hear you. I could hear you, but can I go on?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. I was saying that the trust deficit is so terrible right now that people don't take those who govern them seriously. In fact, unfortunately, very sadly, whether it is deserved or not, people think that every move made by the external order is designed to achieve only one goal: the pecuniary benefits of those involved. That may be very unfair, but that's the perception. The nature of state capture in Nigeria and the way it has been perceived by the Nigerian people has reached a point where really truly people have difficulty believing the intentions of public officials right now. And so the ordinary Nigerian thinks the so-called amendment effort is a scam that people are using to feather their material nests, and that really truly the current leadership in the National Assembly and the executive branch don't want the current order to change because it facilitates their personal goals. And so people refuse to accept what is going on as the way that we should go forward. Now, if it is truly a democracy, political leaders should have sensors that give them a feedback on the environment and the way that people think, and incorporate this in the choices that they make. Now, the NCF, which I am part of, as you have mentioned, this movement, which has a big meeting today in Abuja, bringing together leaders of conscience and leaders of thought from across the country to look at the state of the nation, has essentially said, since the people can generate a higher level of trust of themselves in groups, that the NCF will launch a constitution review and rewrite process. And it's empaneled a group of highly respected people to begin working on a constitution writing process. Between Dr. Hakim Baba Ahmed, Father George Husani, Mr. Olise Bakoba, and the rest of them working on that constitution review process. And we should have a document available to put in the public domain for the Nigerian people to debate. Dele Farotimi and his group of really very people have already put up a document that is in the public domain for the Nigerian people to debate. What we need to do is get to a point where the National Assembly takes itself seriously enough to say the Nigerian people are already carrying on this process. Let us collate what they are putting out there and let us put it before the Nigerian people for a synthesis and a referendum to decide how Nigeria moves forward. Even though there is a legitimacy deficit for the current order, there is still a legal basis for them to do some things. And if they would, as it were, beef up their legitimacy by recognizing what the people are already doing, and then pull all of this together to say, you are the people, this is what you are doing. We, as your representatives ostensibly, no matter what the questions about how people got elected are, say that you are the people and you matter. This is a sovereign test, and we are going to take what you have begun to prepare. We're going to take the Dele Farotimi document. We're going to take the NCF document. We're going to take the other efforts that are being made, and then we're going to put this together and say this is our sense of the synthesis of this, and you Nigerian people vote on this as a modus vivendi that we can live together around.
All right, Professor, before we get into the details of this proposed document, is there a time frame for it to cross a hurdle where the National Assembly can actually look at it? I'm looking at it in terms of 2023 elections, because that's where most Nigerians are looking at. That if we are to discuss 2023 elections, we must first of all resolve the issue of Nigeria's continued existence and how that existence is, what are the terms and reference of that existence. Do you think this conversation of this new document you're talking about is something that can be dealt with before 2023?
Yeah, even though I missed your first couple of seconds, I think that I get the gist of your questioning. Listen, a lot of people who are angry and talking about Nigeria's continued existence and all of that, and the anger is legitimate, but I think that any rational conversation will lead us to a conclusion that if we can patch up these errors from yesterday, we are better off together than apart. I think that that is a logical path that any real serious conversation will end up in. But you can't force it on people. If people feel that together they are being enslaved, together they are being bullied and being subhuman, and then they may say, okay, in a smaller bit, which may be, inadequate, I'm better off than being a slave in this bigger arrangement. However, I think that most rational people recognize that history thrust on this entity called Nigeria a huge, if you will, burden, the burden of the redemption of the black man. And I think that if we don't live up to that burden of history, history will judge us all very harshly. I think that we must begin by essentially ensuring that the dignity of the human person, any person, anywhere in Nigeria, is lifted, is upheld. Once a document can ensure that, I think that most Nigerians are pretty much inclined to living together. But we can ask them, we can test these things out. It is not an accident that a document called the Constitution of the United States of America has been considered by some historians like Neil Ferguson as perhaps the greatest effort at institution building in human history. And the reason that is so considered is because, in spite of the imperfections in the American system at the time of that Constitution, it anticipated a latter day when things can be more appropriate, can be more normal in the crafting of that document. And so, if today we recognize that there are imperfections in Nigeria, but we can craft a document that allows us all to literally reach out to the sun and grab it if we wanted to, then people will be comfortable living together. And the greater benefit of this bigger customs union, this greater opportunity for us to seek to actualize our humanity, I think will be valued and pursued rather than going separate ways as it seems at this moment.
Professor Utomi, since we've gone, in the way of talking about the fact that it is better for Nigeria to stay together, we cannot overlook some of the reasons and some of the reasons why we're having secessionist threats and why we're having many parts from the southeast to the southwest. We're having these threats of breakaway. People want self-determination. The Northern Elders Forum have said that let the Igbos go if they want to. The coalition of northern groups, they allow Igbos have Biafra to avert a civil war. Why is IPOB in the southeast agitating? Why is the popular Sunday Igbo whose following continues to increase exponentially in the Yoruba land, is also asking, it also has a separatist agenda. Now, shouldn't we first begin to deal with the issues that is making these set of Nigerians ask to be separated from Nigeria?
I don't have to go far to answer that question. You can answer that question with one word: leadership. I think the atrocious nature of leadership in this country in its recent history has led to people saying, heck, I'm better off, in something not as attractive if this is what I'm going to get. Just because of poor leadership. I mean, the political class has been a disaster. We need to recognize this. The political class has taken Nigeria so far back because of the narrowness of their understanding of things, because of the quality of people who make up that political class, because of the goals that they have set for themselves, where they could set bigger and broader, more elevating goals, more edifying goals. Now, and I give you a little bit about the history of how we've gotten to this, and this is so very important. Back in the day in Europe, when the warring families, as it were trying to establish the boundaries of influence, a long war was fought. It's generally referred to as the 30-year war. Sometimes they're called religious wars. These wars ostensibly began from what is referred to in one of those Latino-Roman expressions, the defenestration of Prague, which happened in 1618. Now, the result of these struggles was an agreement that came to be known as the Peace of Westphalia, which was arrived at in Innsbruck and one or two places around Germany, Austria, around 1648. Now, this has basically defined how countries have dealt with each other, has created this sense that the non-interference doctrine, the sacrosanct nature of the nation state as carved up, is the way that the world should go.
Well, it seems to be having some network issues there with Professor Pat Utomi. We'll hopefully resolve that as soon as possible and have it back. We're still looking at constitutional review, state of the nation, secessionist threats, and agitation going on in different parts of the country. And of course, we're going to be looking at the state of the economy as well, and what can be done to help salvage what appears to be a slide into one of the worst economic nightmares Nigeria has ever had to experience, with the cost of living going on the high, skyrocketing on a daily basis. Professor Pat Utomi has been a guest for the past couple of minutes, and do bear with us as we try to get him back on the network.
Maybe we'll take a quick break and return shortly. Thank you for being patient with us. We now have Professor Pat Utomi back with us. Yes, Prof, there was a problem, but thankfully it has been resolved. We allow you conclude and land on your thoughts as quickly as you can, so that we'll talk a little on the economics.
Talking about how the Armenian genocide, the World War II, and even though we live in denial about it in Nigeria, the Nigerian Biafra War, which is considered the second worst genocide of the 20th century, has resulted in this doctrine of self-determination being taken seriously globally. The point is that
all right, we still seem to be struggling with the network there. Professor Pat Utomi, and please still bear with us as we try to resolve it.
Well, a lot Professor Pat Utomi has said, a lot of things that makes you just, cringe as a Nigerian, how Ghana is constantly choosing over Nigeria, when before no world power could make a decision or practically make a decision around Africa without consulting Nigeria. And this is how Nigeria has somehow become strategically irrelevant and sidelined in the scheme of things across the globe. When highlights like these are made, it really makes you begin to think of or realize just how bad the situation is getting, and the need to find urgent solutions to this problem. If possible, find a way of bypassing a lot of the unfortunate situations that Nigerians have found themselves.
And Salam, he hit it well on the nail on the head when he talked about leadership. The buck stops at the table of leadership, and when leadership fails to exercise leadership, then we have a crisis of leadership, which is what we're having at the moment. Well, we hear that Professor Pat Utomi is back with us on the line. Professor, thank you so much for still being there with us. The network is trying to frustrate us, but we'll try to overcome that. Thank you for still being there. Could you please conclude your thoughts? Because I quickly wanted to ask, are you there with me? Can you hear me, Professor?
Yes,
Utomi?
I can hear you clearly. I was hearing you. I thought somebody was trying to prevent my thoughts from being heard. That was a deliberate interference to prevent what I was saying from being heard.
Oh, well, I bet that wouldn't be successful. So please go ahead.
Are you sure your signals are not being deliberately jammed by somebody?
We hope not, Professor. But let's just go ahead.
Generating into a fascist state, unfortunately, and we must do something to stop that.
Absolutely. Yes. So the other point that I want for you to address, Professor Pat,
is such that
yes,
Americans can include such in their constitution and still expect that people will want to live together. So a feeling about separation doesn't mean separation. It means that you have the freedom to exercise it, and that pushes leaders to be more responsible in ensuring that everybody works together and works together well. That's the conclusion of where I was traveling. That people feeling like breaking up does not mean that they will break up. Americans get angry, threaten secession all the time, but nobody takes them seriously. And I think that's where we should get to, by having the kind of responsible leadership that runs the country in a way that makes that thought an irrelevant one.
How does responsible leadership solve this problem? Is it restructuring through, credible constitution amendment process? How can this be solved in the immediate?
Yeah, I think that a better understanding from our experience of, structure of the country can help. And I think that from our experience, we can see now that people were more effective in, say, the 1963 constitutional arrangement, even though it had its challenges. But we've learned something from the presidential system, and we could nicely go back to a differently structured parliamentary system, in my view, that's my personal view, perhaps more similar to the French type of, parliamentary system. But we do need to return to people who are closer to the people. We do need a political order that takes keeping money out of politics very seriously. I mean, we can learn from South Korea how they kept the money bags out of politics and saved their country. Right now, what we call politics is actually a business enterprise where some people corner the environment through a political party that is a enterprise, actually. I mean, you collect your members together, export a lot of money from them in the name of their being candidates, but you're not even going to allow them to run. And so, when the political parties are a criminal enterprise, by extension, the state is likely to become a criminal enterprise. Because those who come through those processes can only act to preserve the order, which is criminality. And then you get this state capture scenario where anybody who feels can talk any nonsense, recognizing that the nature of the structure of the power prevents you from being able to hold him accountable. Which is the reason a week ago, a group that I belong to, the Old Concerned Professionals in their New Fabian Society, had a national town hall meeting in which we said that professional bodies should be able to hold their members accountable. If lawyers are serious, all the lawyers in government who currently talk nonsense ought to be debarred and prevented from practicing law as a group of lawyers. If accountants are serious, all the accountants that enable treasuries to be looted ought to be struck off the roll of ICANN. If we go that kind of way, we can save our country. The way that we're going, our country is just going to be a sad criminal enterprise, and we'll lose the respect of the world, as is sadly going on right now. So these people have to wake up, that we have to find different ways of ensuring accountability in a system that chooses not to account, recognizing that people in power are agents of those who ostensibly elected them. And the agency function, wherever it is, whether it's in corporate scenarios, where you have corporate governance, or in political scenarios, those systems must have a way of having central the interest of the shareholders or stakeholders and being held to account on performance relative to the needs of those stakeholders.
Prof, so it's hard for us to have you and not just pick your brain about the economics of Nigeria. So let's talk about that as quickly as we can. I'm going to try to put it, just very as easy as the layman will put it. All we know is that the cost of food is on an all-time high and continues to rise exponentially, like on a daily basis. Not like last month it was this bag of rice was 22,000 and then next month is 24. We see from one day to the next, and almost in some cases 50%, 100% increment in the cost of commodity foodstuff and general livelihood. Nigerians are struggling. The inflation is on an all-time high, and it's difficult for people to find their bearing, with the way the economy is. I want you to talk to us quickly about solutions. You already know the problems. Let's hear from you about the best possible and quick solutions to the economic problems that we currently are dealing with.
Well, thank you. Of course, the internet made me miss some parts of what you said, but I get the full gist about inflation and why it is that we are where we are. Well, the very simple definition of inflation is when there is a lot more money chasing few goods. So if you want to go to a direct, simple answer, the answer is produce more. How do we produce more? Well, if you have insecurity and you can't go to the farms, you can't produce more. And so there will be more money in people's pockets chasing the few goods that are going to be available because you didn't produce more. And so inflation is going to take over and make life more miserable for everybody. And so not understanding the urgency of now that is involved with the situation of insecurity, I think is a very sad and desperate thing, because it's about much more than people getting killed on the farm. It's about the fact that there won't be food enough in the markets, so that people are going to have to pay a lot more for food that is available. If we cannot go to produce other things short of whatever comes from crude oil sales, and crude oil sales are getting out of fashion, not only is it getting out of fashion, because in the next 20 years it's going to be hard to find somebody buying a crude oil for purposes of getting a petrol in his tank. And so investors are not coming as quickly as you would like them to come into the oil and gas sector in Nigeria, at least the crude sector. And what are you doing about making access to investment in gas so easy to the midstream in that area? But we are so distracted with our politics. Yeah. Nigeria is a country ruined by politics. We're so distracted in our politics that we can't create a living environment to bring investments into that midstream area that will create hundreds of thousands of jobs and empower people to invest their savings in other productive activity.
Professor Utomi,
talking politics from morning till night.
Sadly, which is quite unfortunate.
Very tragic for a country.
Very tragic, Professor Utomi. Unfortunately, that's the much we have time for. I think we should have you especially on an episode to talk just the economy, because that's one thing that affects the everyday man directly and more seriously. Thank you so much for your time with us. Professor Pat Utomi is a co-chair